Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for this virtual unveiling of my creative arts scholarly project. I'm Pamela Chen, a fourth-year medical student, and I'm honored to share my gallery of oil portraits and interviews of 5 prominent HMS alumnae entitled The Women Before Me, especially during Women's History Month. Once HMS resumes normal operations, this gallery will be physically on view in the TMEX Study and Collaboration Center. For now, though, I'd like to briefly share my personal narrative about this undertaking. At the end of my first year of medical school, armed with discounted oil paints and a blank canvas my mom picked out at a yard sale, I decided to capture the experience of being initiated into this profession, a self-portrait commemorating our white coat ceremony. I ultimately completed a series of self-portraits after every year of medical school so far, showing the change from idealization of a career to the actual gritty, often unthanked doing of it. When these paintings moved from my bedroom walls to those of HMS's Gordon Hall, however, they became imbued with a new political significance beyond their original diary-like purpose. I was now one of very few women, never mind women of color, painted on our walls. I struggled with that realization for months, becoming keenly aware of how the portraits on our campus and in our hospitals, which almost universally feature white men, differed from the demographic composition of my classmates. Indeed, the AAMC reports that women have officially comprised the majority of entering medical students since 2017. And for HMS specifically, over half of my classmates are women, and about half are either Asian or underrepresented minorities. These are 2 pictures of my entering classes orientation in the Bornstein Amphitheater of Brigham and Women's Hospital, a lecture hall which previously was adorned with dozens of portraits of white male department chairs. Although those paintings have controversially been removed and redistributed around the Brigham, hospital hallways filled with paintings of white men remain the norm. And even though I'm sure these men have all accomplished great things, more often than not I avoided looking. Such portraits can be argued to contribute to unconscious bias, to silently repeat the narrative that white men are intrinsically better scientists and doctors, without acknowledging the centuries of exclusion, suppression, and bias that continues to limit people of other genders and races from the same opportunities. The lack of diversity in such portraits can serve as ever-present reminders to minority medical trainees that maybe we don't belong here, that we are imposters after all. Indeed, female medical trainees and people of color are more likely to report imposter syndrome, mistreatment during training, and disproportionately leave academic medicine. The structural inequalities that serve as barriers for women and minority physicians, the root causes of why we're disproportionately underrepresented in senior leadership and such portraits, are often insidious and hidden. Nevertheless, art, by its very nature, can shine a spotlight on the previously unnoticed and make visible the invisible. Larger-than-life oil portraits follow in centuries of tradition to portray people in positions of power: pharaohs, emperors, kings, more recently politicians, and new professional elite. Portraits of this scale have always carried heavy cultural connotations of class. Contemporary portrait artists have often used this meta-understanding to subvert our expectations and refocus our attention towards overlooked subjects. There's Mary Beth Meehan, whose banner portraits in a small town of Georgia caused significant backlash from its own residents. There's Kehinde Wiley, who paints Black subjects into grand art history tropes, something he considers a bittersweet dissonance. He famously recently painted President Barack Obama's portrait for the National Portrait Gallery. Then there's MacArthur genius Titus Kaphar, whose paintings very pointedly redirect our attention, forcing audiences to reckon with American history of slavery and segregation. Clearly, paintings send a message. The question is, what message do we want to send? This movement to diversify our walls hasn't been isolated to art galleries and museums. It's reached our own ivory tower of medicine as well. Dr. Lynch and others have been spearheading efforts to increase diverse representation in artwork at HMS. The NIH has a Changing the Face of Medicine online photographic gallery of women, and Georgetown and Yale just installed photographic exhibits of women scientists and physicians as well. I recall the jolts of validation I felt the few times I saw a woman or person of color in an honor wall painting on campus, and I wanted to believe there had to be so many women before me who deserved that formal recognition. As a medical student, I recognized I couldn't fix issues of faculty recruitment, promotion, or retention, these deeper issues, yet. But I also knew that, armed with my paints and canvases, I could make people look. I could make people notice what was missing. In between sub-internships and Step 2 exam preparation, I began working with the Office of Recruitment and Multicultural Affairs, the Center for the History of Medicine in Countway, and the Harvard Medical Alumni Association to connect with multiple living Harvard Medical alumni, starting with a member of our first co-educational class of 1949, Dr. Raquel Cohen. Even though I only had the time to interview and paint 5 of them for this project, it was deeply validating to realize there were dozens and dozens who deserved to be on our walls. These are women who represent multiple intersections of identity and career paths, who surmounted barrier after barrier in achieving their leadership positions in academic medicine, and who worked tirelessly in helping the vulnerable and the voiceless. Interviewing these women was revelatory. Despite their many paths, many of them highlighted similar moments in their careers of systematic discrimination, when they had been denied opportunities over inaccurate assumptions of ability, when they had been passed over for promotion because their work was not taken as seriously as that of a male colleague, when they had to grapple with societal and personal expectations of motherhood. The old adage about the minority experience, twice as hard for half as much, rang true. They also spoke, however, about how their identity formation turned into unexpected connections and a passion for advocating for others with pride. I shared countless affirming moments with them, rolling our eyes over shared microaggressions, slipping into Mandarin for a brief moment with Dr. Lee, laughing bittersweetly and admitting, yeah, patients still think I'm the nurse too. They all emphasized the importance of mentorship and of self-care. Often, they addressed their advice specifically to me, calling me future Dr. Chen. I couldn't help but feel I had just gained 5 new mentors, women who saw their young selves in me, women whom I could see myself becoming. I began traveling for my pediatric residency interviews, asked repeatedly about my 5 and 20-year plans. Coming home, I would reflect on how I wanted to paint these pioneers. A good portrait does not solely capture an individual's anatomy. Regardless of realism, good portraits make a statement on personhood, on psychology, Dr. Cohen's specialty. In capturing likeness, indeed I was performing a detailed, repeated mental status exam with the subject, appearance, behavior, emotions, thoughts, judgment. With each layer of paint, I seeped myself in each woman's story and perceived internal state, creating an unspoken dialogue. I grappled with the Renaissance dichotomy of portraits of scientists and rational thinkers to be facing right, whereas portraits of women and emotion are often favored to be facing left. How could I capture the fact that Dr. Lee has published hundreds of scientific articles on surgical oncology topics, and that she loves tap dancing and watching movies in her spare time? I carefully considered how we've been socialized to see women's bodies, to minimize their size and age, to emphasize how they dress over how they think and act. I thought about how carefully women have to dress to appear professional. At the same time, I cherished each brushstroke of lipstick, of jewelry, these unapologetically feminine things. I became very aware of the potential pitfalls of caricature, to avoid whitewashing or over-darkening skin tones, or altering racialized facial features, knowing the complex history of colorism, even within racism. For some of these portraits, I recognize that they may become one of the only portraits of someone at this race at the school. In the most difficult lesson of all, I confronted the ignorance of my own allyship when my subconscious biases still made the initial skin tones of Dr. Iazoni appear more ill than intended. As she taught me about the damaging stereotypes of assuming a poor quality of life for wheelchair users, I actively painted more pink and yellow overtones to her skin, adding vibrancy to her appearance. In painting their eyes, their mouths, their wrinkles, their fingers, I tried to capture their resilience, their setbacks, their hard-won confidence. In this labored, layered way, paintings, perhaps unlike the immediate snapshots of photographic headshots, become equally a representation of the artist and her subject, a physical manifestation of this reciprocity. In their creation, the subjective can be made objective, the objective subjective. Soon, these portraits will be officially installed in the Study and Collaboration Center, and I hope you'll be able to read the biographies and interviews that I created of these women and see the paintings in person, because this screen resolution hardly does these images justice. In this bustling student space, I hope they will act as a lasting reminder to future trainees, especially women and women of color like me, that they belong here. I hope they will challenge implicit assumptions about what kind of doctor we value and what a leader in medicine looks like. Of course, the artwork on our walls is just one step in creating an inclusive environment. There is so much more work to be done to promote equity of medical trainees of all backgrounds, across not just the more visible axes of gender and race, but also across hidden ones like sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic status, and others. I know for myself, painting these 5 women and placing them on our walls has been cathartic. It has inspired me to be bolder with my own ambitions, knowing there have been so many others who have paved the way for me. It has increased my conviction that there are countless others whose contributions to medicine have yet to be recognized, who belong alongside them. As I traveled across the country for my interviews, often finding myself once again in auditoriums and hallways where no honor wall portrait subject resembled me, I know now viscerally that I am not alone. One day, 20 or 30 years from now, perhaps someone else will paint me for an honor wall portrait. These are my references, and thank you all for taking the time to listen to this presentation while we double down on our efforts in research, care, and advocacy due to the coronavirus pandemic. I'd like to thank Drs. Cohen, Lee, Higginbotham, Iazoni, and Morano-John for generously sharing their time, stories, and likenesses for this project. I'd also like to thank Dr. Poussin, Rosa Soler, Jessica Murphy, Jonah Lacqua, and Danielle Oriema for all their assistance in helping me identify and connect with these alumni. I'd like to thank Dr. Casper for her mentorship on social disparities, and Dr. Koshbin for his early and enthusiastic artistic mentorship throughout my time at HMS. I especially want to thank Dr. Lynch and all those in the Dean's office who have made this art installation a reality. And finally, to my parents and my fiance who have always supported my ambitions, artistic and beyond. Thank you.